Kyle McNulty, and you're listening to Secure Ventures, the show that follows cutting-edge founders in the cybersecurity space to understand their plights, glories, and revolutionary products. With me in this episode is Liran Grinberg. Liran is one of the founding partners at Team8, one of the most preeminent investors in Israel with over $1 billion under management. Team8 started in 2014 with a focus on cybersecurity and enterprise technology, and has since evolved to include investments in fintech and healthcare as well. Before starting Team8, Liran was in Unit 8200 and then worked in product-focused roles at two high-growth tech companies. In the episode, we discuss his story of starting such a successful fund at a young age, opportunity they saw in a foundry model in Israel, and the areas of cybersecurity that can support standalone public companies as opposed to just acquisition targets. This episode is brought to you by Vulncheck. Vulncheck helps teams defend against weaponized exploits by delivering the most comprehensive vulnerability and exploit intelligence in the market today. Vulncheck gives enterprise and federal teams better, faster data so they can autonomously prevent exploits and reduce risk and outpace adversaries. So what's different about Vulncheck? The company delivers its solutions to teams in machine-readable and consumable formats for a truly autonomous approach to vulnerability prioritization and exploit mitigation. Vulncheck has close to 300 million unique data points, which is 5 times the exploits of ExploitDB, and 200 plus CVEs packaged into complete detection artifacts for proactive teams. Vulncheck provides a full suite of solutions to enable teams with rapid adoption of Vulncheck data, including its community tier of offerings and its enterprise-class solutions, exploit and vulnerability intelligence, and initial access intelligence. With Vulncheck, teams can proactively defend against remote execution events, enrich every data source, and continuously outpace adversaries. If you're interested in learning more about Vulncheck and checking out the free community edition where you can play with their database of known exploited vulnerabilities, please click the link in the show description so they know you came from the podcast. Liran, thanks for coming on the show.
Great being here.
I want to talk through your background a little bit and tie that into the Team8 story. You worked at Conduit and eToro in product management, product development kind of roles. I mean, can you talk me through just what that experience looked like and what kind of lens that gave you on building software?
Sure. So I started my career before Conduit and eToro in Unit 8200 as part of the intelligence forces in the Israeli military. That fits more to what I'm still doing today, which is cyber and infrastructure on the investment side. And that's what I've done at 8200. So started as an engineer, real quickly understanding that I'm not as talented as some of the other engineers in 8200. It's like coming to Ivy League in the US. You understand that you're not as smart as you thought you are. So I was sent to officer school really after less than a year, I think. I did that and came back to lead the team that I was a little bit mediocre at. I was a little bit better there, and then led a bigger team. So I did engineering work and then led R&D teams within the cyber division of 8200. That's where I started my career. I left wanting to better understand the business world. And this is why I thought, while I like technology, product management will allow me to be close to technology, to work a lot with the engineering team, but understand more the kind of what we're developing and why, and define it. So I was seeking product management roles, and the first place I landed is Conduit. Less familiar today, but Conduit at the time was the leading internet company out of Israel. It was a browser platform that had over 250 million daily active users at the time that I was there. Huge scale, and it was a fantastic school of product management for me, as well as internet scale of that capacity. And I led APIs and developers platforms there. So it was a platform where outside developers and companies could have built apps into a marketplace of Conduit. So I was leading that whole space of the APIs and how developers can engage with the platform. So that was the first gig I've done after the military. And the second is yet another, after an entrepreneurial journey in between, the second was in the fintech world, which personally I'm less focused on today, but Team8 as a whole has a whole big practice in fintech. And that company was eToro, as you mentioned. eToro is a social investment network. It's similar to kind of like Robinhood outside of the US, if you'd like. And here too, another great choice of luck. Grew exponentially the whole crypto world and trading and investing in crypto assets was there when I was leading the flagship product at eToro at the time. Fantastic school, again, for scale. In this capacity, it's actually a B2C company. And I learned a lot. So these are the three things, the 8200, Conduit, and eToro that I've done before the Team8 journey.
Well, also that entrepreneurial instance that you mentioned, talk me through what happened there.
It was a short gig. I had that dream, and I think for me, it was too early in my journey. We just assembled a few friends, like-minded friends, and not a very diversified team at the time. Went on a kind of idea exploration and ideation journey, and eventually decided that we're not mature enough, or we want to build more credibility and experience before we go on that journey. And the process of exploration, discovery of problems to solve, and then ideating and validating to actually build a solid company. I tasted it at the time. And then after my tenure, this has become actually our profession. So the beginning of the story of Team8 is actually a lot of it is involved with how we do discovery of problems and how we ideate and validate. So I had a sample of that before. And we can kind of transition into the Team8 story and talk about what we do that is unique in that regard. So I sampled it a little bit at the time, but eventually this was not a company that we actually started.
Yeah, we'll get there in a second. The last thing on this, though, is what was the actual idea?
Of the startup?
Yeah.
We were exploring the entrance of smart TVs at the time, and foreseed kind of like a proliferation of a smart app applications for the smart TV world, and wanted to build the Wix for smart TVs, or kind of like the optimized platform to build apps for television, which had a different user interface, right? So that was the premise at the beginning, but we quickly realized that that's not what we necessarily, that's not the right thing to build necessarily, and not necessarily that we're the right team, apropos team market fit, to build something like this.
Fair enough. All right. Well, let's tie that back into the origins of Team8 then. So you worked at Conduit, you had this entrepreneurial go, you went to eToro, got some more product experience. How did Team8 come together out of that? What was the kind of opportunity that you'd seen at this point?
So the Team8 story and definitely my journey into venture capital is not a straightforward one, and I'm not sure we can kind of learn from it for others. But the Team8 journey started, first of all, with my two co-founders, Nadav and Israel, that have left 8200 after 25 years of service in the defense ecosystem in Israel. And Nadav, one of those co-founders, was the head of 8200. Some will say like director of NSA in Israel. It's a big deal in Israel. And Israel was the head of the cyber division of 8200, which is one of 4 divisions. So these were two of the top folks at 8200. And I worked for them for 6 years back in the days in my military service. And we kept in touch. So we were close during, in Israel, by the way, you do reserve duty. So even if you leave the military, you still serve on the reserve to practice. And in times of emergency and stuff, you can rejoin and help your country. So we were still very close. And Nadav and Israel left after 25 years and decided they want to do something together. And at the time, it wasn't really clear what it will be. And we started brainstorming on this together. And slowly but surely, we became the 3 of us starting this. But the passion was to look at, from Nadav's and Israel's eyes at the time, they had visibility to the thousands of people that have left 8200 annually in the last 10 years or so. And a big portion of them started companies or attempted to build companies. And they knew exactly that some of those folks are really the best of the best, like the top 1% of the 1% that is accepted to 8200, really the smartest people of our nation. And the statistic of failure rate of startups did not skip them, right? So phenomenal, smart people, ambitious, hungry, really extremely talented in technology. And it was not easy to succeed. Some did, some not. And we were obsessed about wait a minute. So what's the apropos my ideation journey that eventually kind of like we didn't build a company. Eventually, we went back to work. What's the backbone of like what's supporting companies to do it the right way and to optimize for those great teams actually building the right thing and aiming for building big companies that will be successful. And I'm taking you back now 11 years back, right? The venture capital ecosystem, which is kind of in a way the backbone of this, was really not as advanced and sophisticated as it is today, right? So we looked at it and we realized that essentially, you'll go and try to fundraise from a fund. The value you'll get at the time is as good as the partner you work with or the team you work with, right? Their advice, their connections could be incredible. But it wasn't something systematic, definitely not in how 2 or 3 entrepreneurs in the garage decide on what they're building and make sure, like validate that they're building something that is solving for a big problem, that has a real pain, that the approach that they came up with really resonate and that they validated it at scale. There wasn't anything there to systematically do it well. And this topic intrigued us. And this was the origination of Team8, trying to kind of like take what 2-3 founders will do in the garage and say, okay, well, maybe we can do it better together. Maybe we can create this platform with capabilities, with resources, with a methodology and a process to de-risk this whole company building journey, right? To make sure at scale that we're solving for a big problem, that people will pay to solve that problem. And when we start ideating on how to solve it and come up with an approach, that approach really resonate and eventually it will make sense. And do a lot of that work before any line of code is written, right? So that you embark on the journey, de-risking a lot of the question marks that will come otherwise along the way from the get-go. And that's essentially what Team8 has been doing for the last 10 years, partnering with incredible founders to start new companies. But even before the idea stage, right? To go one step before and partner together on this journey to build new companies. Today, we also invest like more traditional VCs do, but the origination of Team8 was around this foundry model.
And so if I view this from a slightly more critical angle, let's say maybe a little ignorant as well, it looks like you have all these extremely technical people coming out of 8200 that just need to apply their skill set in the right kind of problem areas. And then you have the 3 of you come together, which from what you just described, you have 2 that haven't worked in the private sector because they've been in 8200 for 25 years. And then you, where your last startup attempt had failed and you'd bounce between a couple product companies. So again, this super ignorant, like very just critical lens, but what was the kind of positioning there in terms of why you 3 were the right fit to actually provide some of that information and be able to perform some of that market assessment and ideation alongside them?
First of all, not necessarily the optimal team to start something like this. We had the passion. We did have, the focus, which I haven't mentioned. The focus was cybersecurity. And in that regard, we did have, I'd say, unfair advantage in access to talent and in understanding the attacker perspective. So we did bring the domain expertise of many years in that space. And cybersecurity was a great market, and it is still a great market. So we were a very, very interesting team in that regard. But definitely, if you look at how we, on the journey, fast forward a few years' time, when we started expanding to additional domains and built additional partner teams that drive the newer domains at Team8, these are accomplished unicorn founders that are actually have built companies before and have a lot of domain expertise as well, whether it's fintech or digital health or data and AI infrastructure, which are the other domains beyond cyber that we're involved in today. So they brought the domain expertise, but they also have built companies to exits or to unicorn status before. We have quite a few of them as partners at Team8 today. We weren't that team. we did bring something very unique in the domain expertise. And we were curious and ambitious on this. And to be honest, the Team8 journey is a startup journey. When we started it, we got a lot of no's, raising capital for the first fund, which wasn't exactly a fund, but raising money for it wasn't easy. And the people that have gave faith in us, the greatest example is Yuval Shachar, who's now a managing partner at Team8 and our chairman and doing this full time with us. At the beginning, he was an investor, but he was one of those first people to actually give us those leap of faith that although we don't have the entrepreneurial background, we have something like an interesting model and approach here that might succeed. So definitely a startup, very humbling startup journey at the beginning with a few good people that believed in us, and then just a lot of building the process, the methodology, the capabilities that we've built at Team8 throughout the years for this process of discovering and then ideating and validating for creation of new startup companies is something that we've perfected again and again throughout the years. And still, I think with the domain expertise and those incredible pool of talent that we assembled alongside us, that first Team8 fund that was just aimed to build 5 companies, it's a fantastic fund. We've built, we've partnered with incredible founders that have built companies that were acquired by Proofpoint and Cisco and PayPal and Temasek. And there's one company, all the other were acquired, but there's one company left out of that first vehicle that launched 5 companies, which is Clarity. And Clarity is a unicorn, raised over $700 million in venture capital, I believe. Generates way over 100 million in ARR. Hopefully will go IPO in the coming years. And we're very proud of that outcome. So although we weren't the optimal team maybe at the time, that first experiment of what Team8 will grow to be was pretty successful.
Yeah, clearly. And we'll definitely talk more about some of the Team8 successes in a second here as well. I'm curious because you mentioned this foundry model, some of these companies you're working with, maybe pre-idea, you have the technical and domain knowledge. I mean, when you started Team8 and the 3 of you got together, did you have specific thesis areas? Again, this is 11 years ago, 2013, 2014, that you said, okay, these are the specific areas where we want to kind of push companies towards because we see so much market opportunity here.
Yeah, we are, and we're very thesis driven, definitely on the foundry side. And this is a thesis that keeps evolves, right? And it changes during time. We did have the first company that we built together with Ofer, the founder and CEO of that company at the time, Elusive, was looking at APT attacks and how you can detect them early on before most of the damage is done. And this is how this whole notion of deception technology came up. This was a thesis that we had before kind of like the fund was raised. The second company there was Clarity in the industrial world. And Amir Zilberstein, who eventually became the founder and CEO of that company, and many years after that, became now a partner at Team8. With him, we've built the original thesis around that problem space of cybersecurity for the industrial world. So we did have quite a few thesis areas at the time, and obviously our cyber investment thesis we continue to inform ourselves and to adapt it, etc. If we'll down this recording talk about more modern stuff, we'll definitely throw the word AI into it, right? And okay, so how do we now look at AI and security, and how does that inform our thesis? So it's an ongoing thing. By the way, one word that you threw there on the kind of teams that the technical teams that go out of 80 to 100 and start companies, I will say that yes, in Israel the technical talent is phenomenal, and there's nothing that those incredible talent pool of people can't build. But it's not that we're necessarily partnering with founders that are straight out of 80 to 100 or other areas in the military. by the way, we also partner with founders from not that background at all. But the vast majority of the teams that we partner with on the journey are actually ones that have done additional things in the private sector thereafter. So we do very much appreciate and believe in kind of gaining the relevant experience, because, building a startup is such a hard journey. You do want to be prepared and have as many as capabilities and experience as possible. And a lot of the teams that we work with are second-time founders that have built companies before and are now doing it again. And funnily enough, the more you're experienced in entrepreneurship and know how hard that craftsmanship is and how hard building company is, the more those founders are actually appreciative of the kind of value add and support and capabilities that Team8 provide in that journey. And appreciate it with the goal of actually optimize for success. With what can we do to make sure we're building the right thing, that we move as fast as possible and do as little as mistakes that have been done before as possible, right? And just do new mistakes.
That's an interesting angle that I actually haven't heard before, around the idea of the second-time founder potentially having some more humility because they've kind of gone through it the first time, understand all the challenges, and think themselves, well, maybe it would be nice to have someone around the second time who can be a little bit more hands-on, right? So let's talk about the acquisitions, some of these successful exits that you've alluded to. A couple in particular came to mind. Dig and Talon, both acquired by Palo over the last couple of years here. I mean, what are your thoughts and overall perspective? Obviously, an exit is a great outcome on just the kind of state of M&A in cyber today, and more of these companies getting sucked up. I mean, we had IBM just acquire HashiCorp. There's all the PE activity that's taking place as well. Palo's continuing to be active. Cisco, like you mentioned earlier, acquired another one of your portfolio companies. How do you see this impacting the overall kind of returns assessment or probability of some of these different outcomes of IPOs versus acquisitions and your kind of returns there?
It's a great topic. I think step back, cybersecurity is extremely acquisitive. It's a huge market. It's growing very fast, and it changes a lot. And this is why I think it's an interesting category, unlike any other, because of the fact that there's an adversarial, there's the attacker on the other side who's moving faster than us, and there's changes in technologies that are independent to this industry. So there's always new things happening. So it's I'm actually feeling fortunate to be part of this exciting industry, because there's never a dull moment in security. And regarding M&A, there's this swing, I'd say, that tilts between times of market slowdown and versus times where we have prosperity and things are really going up, right? So in times of market slowdown, you do see people talk more about consolidation and platform play and budget optimizations and cost reduction. And in those times that are supposedly not so good for startups, right? Because it's harder to sell, and these are best of breed solutions that we're trying to sell, etc. Even in those hard times, you do see a lot of that consolidation, right? So you do see the demand for the bigger platforms to actually meet all those problems that you need to solve for. So even in those times, you see healthy acquisitions market in security. And definitely, if you look at the times of prosperity and when the markets are up, then there is more budgets, and we're seeing customers more so adopting best of breed solutions, and everybody's revenues are great and all of that. In these times of, obviously, there's also acquisitions. So I think just generally, this is an industry that it's hard not to be constantly innovating. So, there's this saying of, that you will never get fired for only buying IBM. In cybersecurity, you will definitely get fired for only buying IBM. Not to say anything bad about IBM, but, the big vendors, it takes them time, right, to innovate and really address those extremely emerging threats. And in most cases, It's startup companies that are tackling those emerging threats. And eventually they can be consolidated to one of the big platform players or just the big vendors, right? We have great partners at Palo Alto Networks and CrowdStrikes and the like. And for the industry, those M&As, which, by the way, if you look at the M&As that you just mentioned, Talon was acquired for $625 million, being less than 3 years old. Dig was acquired for north of $300 million when the company was about 2 years old. There's actually another acquisition since. This is all from the last 8 months or so within the Team8 portfolio. The most recent one is Gem Security, that was acquired by Wiz. Funnily enough, another Israeli startup, right? Private company still. That acquisition was also approximately $350 million. The company was less than 2 years old. These are phenomenal outcomes in such a short time. And it's good for the industry, right? These are great outcomes for the founders, for the investors, for the employees. And these folks will build new companies again. And on the next journey, they'll come, even apropos our previous discussion, even more experience, etc. And all those three examples are bittersweet examples, because if I look at all those three teams, Talon, Dig, and Gem, these were all phenomenal founding teams. All of them could have built much bigger companies also, not just sell relatively early. They were all, apropos to your question, they were all tackling big problems that I believe, and this is our thesis, right? We invest in a company when we believe it could be a big independent company of itself. We don't back a company that we think their only trajectory is to get acquired early on. So if you look at the secure enterprise browser category, and apropos the big raise of Talon, this could be a huge company. This category could be massive. If you look at what Dig has done in data security posture management and in pioneering data detection and response, I think there's a huge opportunity to build a data security company for the modern enterprise, apropos thesis areas. And if you look at Gem, this whole kind of world of SOC and detecting for attacks in the modern infrastructure of cloud, again, a huge opportunity. And there's companies focusing just on the SOC and detection and not the whole of posture and vulnerabilities and all of that. There are huge companies, and here too, Gem could have been a big one. So in each of those three, it's a bittersweet outcome. Mainly bitter because we won't be working with those teams as closely as we did. But great outcomes, everybody happy. But on the other hand, it could have been even bigger companies. So I think coming back to your original question, there's, from time to time, there are categories in securities that will probably, can create good exit outcomes, but maybe huge companies won't be built out of that. And there's many categories that huge companies could be built. It's not only about the category and the market opportunity, because, companies expand to additional offering and cross-sell additional stuff. It's a combination of many things. It's the execution, it's the passion of what the founders wanting to build. So it's an industry where there's a lot of M&A, but from time to time, big companies are being built. And apropos, from Israel, there's a lot of great examples of those big companies.
Walk me through a little bit of your framework in terms of assessing whether or not a company could be standalone in this market. So you gave a few examples: secure browsers, data security posture management. I think secure browsers is more clearly, at least in my mind, kind of standalone from existing tools that are out on the market today. Data security posture management, on the other hand, kind of plays more naturally with the existing cloud security solutions and CSPM. I mean, even just the acronym is so similar when you look at it that way, right? So how do you think about which of these companies can stand alone, what that market opportunity looks like, and the likelihood that they'll be acquired based on that similarity to existing platforms?
Fascinating topic. So, when we assess if something could be a big standalone company, it's obviously it should solve for a big problem. The aptitude to pay at the customers should be significant. We want something that has depth in technology, that is not an easy tucking or a feature on some other platform. And as you mentioned, the secure enterprise browser example is there's owning a browser is a whole big heavy lifting, and it's an example of a product, of a platform that covers so much security controls stemming from the endpoint in isolation and in data leak prevention and in so many areas that we protect through the browser, through that real estate of the browser, and it's so complex and deep. So here you go, intuitively, you believe that this could be a big company. And obviously, again, it will be super successful within Palo Alto as well, right? It could be both. In data security, for example, and you did mention DSPM, right? So you said intuitively, wait, DSPM sounds like CSPM. It should be a feature within the cloud security folks. First of all, yes, it can be. But if you look at, for example, Varonis, which is an independent company worth a couple of billions of dollars in the public markets, focusing mainly on data security. If you zoom out to kind of the origination story of Dig security in the DSPM space, they chose, the entry point was to focus on cloud infrastructure, but thereafter, with the same engine that knows how to discover data and classify data and look at the configurations of data and then detect the usage of data by users, by applications, detect the anomalies, detect malicious pattern, and then response to it, this whole thing can be applied to data that resides in public cloud infrastructure, could be in platforms in the cloud, and then you can take it to SaaS applications in the cloud as well. And then you can take it to the on-premises world. And Dig was on the verge of touching all of these at the time of acquisition when the company was just 2 years old. So then you'd say, okay, wait, there's an opportunity here to build the data security company for the modern enterprise. And that was the vision with Dig, right? And that's a huge company. That's a multi-billion-dollar company, just like Varonis is, for sure, like a new, a modern such one. So we need to see that thesis in mind. And you're a startup, so you can't do anything. So, right, the entry point here was to focus on cloud infrastructure because this was the emerging attack surface and all of that. And then, the execution takes you to a very rich M&A, great. But the plan was to build something big.
It's interesting to hear you focus largely on the technical complexity of each of those different areas, as opposed to some of the other dynamics, like, let's say, the need that buyers have. I think that's very informative in terms of thinking about some of the other factors that kind of lie in place for why a company might get acquired, or what kind of gives them that moat to be able to continue to develop and foster into such a big company that actually can justify a public exit. So really, really
it's
interesting.
It's actually a great point. So I'll say that it's inherent with what I said, but you're actually right. Sorry for stopping you. If you look at that example of data security, in the more mature CISO programs, there's an owner that does just data security, and it does that across the stacks in cloud, in SaaS, in on-premise. And this is exactly alluding from a go-to-market perspective that buyer will not necessarily don't want to find themselves taking, a data security feature from his CSPM and a data security feature from his SaaS security product. And then he actually needs a platform to look at this holistically. And that's kind of like the vision. So I think you're spot on.
So I want to throw a couple other areas at you and get your thoughts on whether or not there is this kind of ability for a standalone company to truly exist and kind of flourish in these spaces. So let's take API security as, I think, one kind of fairly popular area that a lot of people go back and forth on whether or not there's the potential. What are your thoughts there?
Team8 does not have a play in API security. I personally believe that API security companies will probably evolve to broader, bigger platform plays in order to sustain a big company and not focus just on API security. It can definitely, again, be a good entry point, and it was. There's quite a few companies that have significant traction based on that. I think their longer term vision will evolve to be more than the scope of API security.
And is the reason for that similar to what we were just talking about, where it's maybe around technical complexity, where like the actual API scanning methodologies are not inherently so complicated because of just the way API connections work to begin with and the accessibility of kind of scanning and crawling them? Or is there more to the kind of ideology there?
I think it's actually your latter feedback point of it's one aspect of a broader platform of securing infrastructure for the same buyer, right? And if eventually this can be consolidated to something that is looking at things more broadly, it will probably evolve that way.
Sure. So how about, I think I know where this answer is going, but AI security?
Okay, AI security is interesting because everybody's talking about it, right? So just to take a step back, when you look at the intersection of AI and security, even before we zoom into that, so there's a few areas to talk about. One is actually what you just mentioned, which is AI security, meaning securing the AI infrastructure, and we can zoom in to that. There's a second interesting area, which is actually how attackers will use AI for newer attack paths. So we're already seeing attackers using Gen AI capabilities to create more tailored, more sophisticated, phishing campaigns, and we're already seeing the use of deep fake in audio and video to pretend to be someone else, and it's not we've seen an attack where the CFO is allegedly supposedly calling his superiors and asking for a wire, and this is completely fake. All those things, attackers are moving faster than defenders. We're seeing attackers leveraging AI faster than what we will, which is the third point that I'll talk about. So this whole area of trust in a world where attackers and scammers can use Gen AI capabilities, apropos elections in the US soon and in other areas, super, super interesting area. And the third element of the intersection of AI and security is how the security industry can leverage AI, right? And that opens a whole thesis map of where can you now apply the advancements in AI to either disrupt existing security categories or create a new security category in an area maybe that couldn't have been productized before, right? Maybe that you had to do it with manual work, or you just technology couldn't solve it before, and now with Gen AI you can solve it with a product and make it much more automated or sophisticated. So this is how I would kind of like break down AI security on all of those three things: securing the AI itself, attackers using AI, and defenders using AI. It's three different things.
Okay, so let's go, well, I guess piece by piece, but maybe only for the first two, because I would argue that the third one extends across so many different categories that that's less of a category in itself. You could push back against that. But thinking about the first two, so securing AI infrastructure, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, interesting space for sure. And the thesis here is that the adoption of these modern AI capabilities is super, super, super fast. So while some will say, and rightfully so, the market is not existent just yet, it's a fair point. On the other hand, something big is happening in the world, similar to what we've seen when cloud infrastructure burst, and it seems like it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. So it's worth having the bet on something that the world will slowly but surely start to realize what the needs are and entering it even before the market is really existing. We were, by the way, at Team8, this is one example where, we haven't announced a company in that space because we thought we should be a little bit more patient and see how this space matures a little bit, not in 3 years' time, but just to see a little bit how the world goes. And then decide how do we actually build a company to solve for the security challenges of an infrastructure that is still in the making and still being adopted and not maturely deployed. And now I really understand how to secure it. So we're figuring that out. And in many categories, it's not the pioneer, the first company that hits big. It's actually the second wave or even the third wave. Some will say Wiz, for example, is the third wave of cloud security. Definitely not the first, probably not the second, right? And they're maybe now the largest. And in startup land, maybe they've built the largest outcome. So to date in cloud security, they weren't the pioneers. So this might be the case in AI security, which I think will be a big category, but will take time to get there. I see more, that the real traction in AI security today is in actually, protecting the employees using all sorts of Gen AI based applications. So it's kind of like shadow AI usage of, let me understand who's using ChatGPT, who's using all the other stuff, what is being done there, what's going into those platforms, what's coming out of those platforms. Let's monitor that, let's govern that, let's audit that. That's of existence of today. The more sophisticated stuff of actually protecting the models, of prompt injections, of how do you manage access to knowledge coming from Gen AI models versus more simplistic data stores that we had before. These are forming, and very sophisticated organizations are equipped to start adopting such technologies today, but the world is still catching up. It's fairly a very, very, very nascent market, but an exciting one, and we're obviously very close to it.
Yeah, around the governance piece, I was just talking to a CISO yesterday who was talking about just how scared he was of these new kind of knowledge indexing tools that are coming out, where they say, okay, we'll ingest your whole knowledge base for your organization and then make it basically AI queryable for the different folks and kind of analysts within your organization. And he was basically saying, I want to stay so far away from this just as a security professional to ensure that I don't have to worry about this new risk posture of my entire knowledge base being exposed to a third party and what that might bring in the future. So definitely super relevant concerns that exist there for, let's say, the more average company, as opposed to necessarily the one that has all of the kind of AI building blocks in place.
And that CISO might want to avoid that, obviously, but he doesn't have a chance, right?
Yeah.
If the world goes there, and he or she will need to protect it somehow. And again, it's a fascinating topic compared to more simplistic policies of data access and governance around it versus kind of like accessing knowledge coming from this AI world. Will be super interesting to see how this develops.
Okay, so what about AI security category number 2 that you described, which is the kind of deep fake detection space? Do you think that's a big enough kind of standalone market to support a company?
That's when you try to speak about security in simplistic terms. These are actually the first example to come to mind, right? Let's talk about attackers using all those Gen AI stuff. And it's, when you talk to a reporter, that's the easiest thing to explain compared to the technical vulnerabilities, APIs, what have you. And it's real, right? Our ability to trust anything digitally that we'll see in the foreseeable future will be a huge challenge. And I'm sure we'll see it a lot in elections. And again, we're already seeing it with cybercrime, using it for, wiring and stuff like that. The tricky part here, or the challenge, and whoever will crack it will be, might be kind of up for a big success. It's who has the interest to pay for something like this. So putting aside of whether technically this can be done, if you can really build the technology, maybe with AI models that will detect the deep fake origination of other AI models, to really give great value of deferring whether a piece of content you see is authentic or not. Let's assume for a second this can be done. Who pays for this? So will you build a company for to sell to media companies to assure before they broadcast something on TV that it's authentic? Is it a big enough market? I don't know. I'm not sure. Do you want to build a company for law enforcement, for police organizations that will know if some evidence is real or not? Is it a big market? I don't know. You probably won't want to build a company to sell just to the social network companies, right? To Facebooks and Twitters of the world, etc. That's maybe too kind of like a niche of. So you need to really understand. Some will say maybe the area that people will talk to is actually financials, for the authentication and onboarding and KYC. In that whole process, you really want to mitigate fraud and crime. Is this a big enough of a problem today? And could you build a big company around it? Because it requires deep technology. So it's more so around what is the use case here that represents a big market opportunity that people pay a lot for. That's kind of like the interesting discovery to be made in this whole deepfake detection and trust in the world of Gen AI content.
Well, there's certainly a massive anti-fraud market and plenty of companies that have been able to kind of make their way surviving off of just the financial services industry in terms of detecting and preventing those kinds of fraudulent transactions. So it seems like if you use that as a baseline, then the answer might be yes, but maybe you could then make the argument that these companies should get folded into a broader anti-fraud company as opposed to being a kind of standalone provider. I think there's a fair argument there too. So last one for you, maybe a little bit more abstract, so maybe a little bit trickier, but we'll see, is around vulnerability prioritization. Because I think more and more companies are kind of trying to bring something like this to market, or at least incorporating it into their existing platforms. So thinking, hey, these companies have all these vulnerabilities available to them. How do they actually decide what they should be looking at? How do you think about whether or not that can truly be a standalone company as opposed to kind of an integration point for a variety of other companies?
Great question. I'd say can look at it from a few perspectives. There's such capabilities that are embedded within specific platforms. For example, if you look at specific findings of application security, there's a whole world of companies. We have a company in our portfolio called Ox Security that is doing software supply chain security and what is now called application security posture management to really oversee the whole application security space. So if you look at the findings of vulnerabilities in code that stem from those platforms, really being able to prioritize that will probably be, you can create a best of breed capability to do that prioritization for that world within such one of those platforms. Because the context that is required for that is, it involves to the reachability to that vulnerability that is existing in the code, to whether that workload is actually exposed to the internet or not, to many things that when you're domain specific, you can maybe do a good job out of it. So that's one question comes to mind. It's a part of domain specific platforms, as opposed to maybe looking at all the findings from your cloud security and vulnerability management and application security and all of that, and trying to build a platform to do all of that. The two approaches are valid, right? And it's a big problem for sure. So that's kind of two ways to look at this space. But I think it's intriguing and it's big, and it's definitely real sophisticated technology that can add the context to really allow you to disregard a lot of the findings and focus on the ones that are really relevant at all, and then prioritize those based on criticality. Whomever cracks, whether in a specific terrain or domain or generically something good, it's a valid proposition. I will say that there's a bigger notion now of bringing more data-driven processes to the security organization altogether. And then some of those players that maybe want to look at a broader data platform for security will have some lens on prioritizing the resolution of findings as part of a bigger story that do all sorts of other analytics and insights that are data-driven for the security programs altogether.
And back to a point you made earlier, then maybe you use it as a jumping off point into that broader platform, right? So just because that component of a platform alone is not enough to be a standalone company, if there's a kind of natural transition into adjacent verticals or adjacent offerings, then maybe it's still a reasonable starting point. So perfect. Well, it's a fun segment to end on. Really appreciate the time and hearing your perspective on just kind of what brought the Team8 story together, how that's evolved over time, and really diving deep into some of these specific areas, or maybe not that deep at the end of the day. There's so much in each of these different verticals, but It's really great to hear your thoughts.
Kyle, this was great fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and you can write to me at kyle@secureventures.io. I'm Kyle McNulty, and you've been listening to Secure Ventures.